Group 2 of Management 611, Spring 2014, chose Emotional Intelligence as their team presentation. Explanation of Emotional Intelligence, a brief definition, history, and characteristics. Emotional intelligence is very complex and a newly defined topic. Leading researchers have defined emotional intelligence as capacity to reason one's emotions to enhance thinking. This can include accurately perceiving emotions, accessing emotions to assist thought, understanding emotion, emotional knowledge, and promoting emotional and intellectual growth. It can also be defined as the ability to process emotional information, including perception, assimilation, understanding, and management of emotion. Some of the first recorded history of emotional intelligence was found 2,000 years ago. Plato said, "All learning has an emotional base." In 1872, Charles Darwin contended that inherent dynamic forces allow only the fittest persons or organizations to prosper in a competitive environment or situation. In 1920, Edward Lee Thorndike, an American educational psychologist, created a concept he called social intelligence. He described it as the ability to understand and manage men and women and to act wisely in human relations. In the 1950s, Abraham Maslow described his hierarchy of needs. The higher the need falls in the hierarchy, the more likely the need involves emotions. In 1983, Howard Gardner, in his book Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences, introduces the notion of multiple intelligences. Two types of intelligence form the foundation for most of the models created related to emotional intelligence. In 1990, John Mayer and Peter Salovey were developing a scientific measure to find the differences in human ability in the area of emotion. The pair found that some humans were better than others at identifying their own feelings, the feelings of others, and solving problems with emotional issues. They published their results in a paper titled Emotional Intelligence. Since 1990, they developed two tests to attempt to measure what they call emotional intelligence. David Caruso collaborated with Mayer and Salovey and co-authored the MSCEIT Emotional Intelligence Test, as well as many research articles and papers. In the 1990s, Daniel Goleman was researching emotions when he discovered the article Emotional Intelligence. Goleman was granted permission to use the term in his next book. The publication of the bestseller Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, introduced emotional intelligence to the general public. After his success with his first publication and in the business community, he wrote his second book, Working with Emotional Intelligence, a more business-focused look at emotional intelligence. Goleman's model is one of the most widely used by individuals and organizations around the world today. The four most common characteristics of emotional intelligence are based on the four-branch model created by Mayer and Salovey. They are the ability to perceive emotions, manage emotions, understand emotions, and use emotions to facilitate thought. The first characteristic of emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive emotion. This is the most basic characteristic and includes nonverbal reception and expression. Facial expressions are universally recognized in human beings. Capability to recognize emotions in the face or voice is a crucial starting point for advanced understanding of emotions. The second characteristic is the ability to manage emotion. There is a need to understand emotion to convey information. Within a person's emotional comfort zone, it is possible to self-regulate emotions and the emotions of others. Means and methods of emotional self-regulation is a growing field of interest today. The ability to understand emotions is the third characteristic. Emotions convey information and patterns that communicate a person's temperament to others. Identifying these patterns allows greater capacity to reason and connect with others. Comprehending the meaning of emotion is central to this group of emotional intelligence skills. The final characteristic is the ability to use emotion to facilitate thought. This characteristic highlights the capacity of emotions to guide the cognitive system and promote thinking. Solid emotional input directs thinking towards important matters. Emotions, such as mood swings, are important for the genesis of creativity.
We will now look at the different approaches to testing one's emotional intelligence. Like any other personality attribute, emotional intelligence can be measured, developed, and compared to others. Emotional intelligence can be tested a number of ways, utilizing one of the three main testing categories: self-reporting, ability testing, and outside reporting. Self-reporting tests are when a subject answers a series of questions regarding their personal emotional habits and patterns. These questions address the test taker's self-perception. A true-false scale is utilized, and the test taker will indicate whether something is true, somewhat false, or false. Ability testing is in contrast to self-reporting and would be considered most like an IQ test. In this scenario, the subject is asked a series of questions regarding emotional and social scenarios. Instead of asking the subject how they perceive these things internally, they are external questions that can be answered without personal insight. Outside reporting tests are similar in form to self-reporting tests. However, it is completed by an outside mediator. Another individual will attempt to answer the questions regarding the subject. For example, subject handles stress well. True, somewhat false, false. This method is not used regularly due to its inefficiency and inherent bias of the intermediary. There are numerous emotional intelligence tests available. A Google search will return hundreds of possible online tests that claim to be able to assess your emotional intelligence score. Most of these tests are based on the self-regulated method, where you will answer questions about your own personality and emotions. The premier tests, however, have been developed by psychological professionals who base their assessments on specific EI philosophies. 4 of the primary EI tests are as follows: the Emotional Competence Inventory based on Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence theories, the Genos Emotional Intelligence Assessment Scale, the Mayer-Salovey-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Tests, and Reuven-Baron's Emotional Quotient Inventory 2.0. For our purposes, we will focus on the last 2. These 2 appear to be the most widely used and the most researched. They also display a contrast between self-reporting and ability testing. The Emotional Quotient Inventory 2.0 is a self-reporting test based on the EI work of Reuven-Baron. It is considered to be one of the most popular EI testing methods available today. Baron developed the EQ concept, meaning that emotional intelligence can be scored and calculated similar to an IQ. Those with a higher EQ score are more intelligent in their emotional and social functioning. The score can predict future success in life's daily demands. With a high EQ score, people can be considered able to understand both themselves and others. As a self-regulated test, the EQI 2.0 asks the subject a series of 133 questions relating to their emotional and social intelligence. The subject will answer these questions using a 5-point scale from not true of me to very often true of me. The test can be performed both online and in paper format. The EQI model will test the subject on various interrelated emotional and social competencies. Barham believes that there are 5 major components, with 15 subcomponents, that are necessary for a high level of emotional intelligence. These categories provide a broad view of emotional and social health. The first category, self-perception, consists of self-regard, self-actualization, and emotional self-awareness. Self-expression is composed of emotional expression, assertiveness, and independence. The interpersonal category is made up of interpersonal relationships, empathy, and social responsibility. The decision-making component is made up of problem-solving, reality testing, and impulse control. The stress management portion consists of flexibility, stress tolerance, and optimism. The user tested will receive a score based on their total results and on each 5 individual categories. In contrast to the EQI test, the Myers-Solovey-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test is an ability-based test which evaluates the subject's responses according to a measure of correct answers. This is done instead of relying on a user's emotional self-judgment. Meyer and Solovey consider this to be a more methodical and accurate approach to measuring emotional intelligence. The test is comprised of 141 items and takes 30 to 45 minutes to complete. The MSCIT addresses the 4 main branches of emotional intelligence that were previously discussed in this presentation. The questions will measure the subject's ability to identify emotions in others, to use emotions to facilitate thought, to understand emotional meanings, and to know how to manage emotions. For example, to identify emotion in others, the test taker will see a picture of a face and they will have to record the emotions that appear visible in the face, whether it be anger or happiness. Since the MSCIT is an ability test, it is possible to grade the results based upon an accepted consensus of correct answers. Unlike an IQ test, the answers for the MSCIT need to be determined. This was done by the authors in the form of a consensus score and an expert score. Consensus scoring is determined by having a large number of people agree on the same answer. For example, if 80% of the people felt that a photo of a person was very angry, then the best answer would be anger. Expert scoring was also used from 21 professionals who determined what the correct answer should be. Both scoring methods yielded similar results. The MSCIT has been researched extensively and has been proven to be both effective and reliable. The overall reliability of the test was 0.93. For perceiving emotion, 0.91. For facilitating emotion, 0.79. For understanding emotions, 0.80. And for the managing emotion branch, the reliability was 0.83.
This section will focus on emotional intelligence in the workplace. So EI can be taught in the workplace, but it's a bit more difficult, and it really depends on the experience of the personnel. Be able to basically have team-based learning and accountability for your actions will allow you to help yourself learn more about how you feel about situations and the experience of interacting and dealing with others and their emotions and their insecurities. Effective leaders tend to be highly emotionally intelligent. They tend to have a cool, calm sense of mind and be able to make professional decisions, and there is a direct correlation between age in the individual and leadership positions with EI, and that's actually shown on the next slide in a few graphs. Impact of EI within the team, this really comes down to management, trickling down to yourself as a middle manager and into your team which you are managing. If you are a person that is affected by anxiety and stress, this will rub off on your team. And just the opposite occurs if you're a cool, calm, easy to get along with type of guy. This would directly affect your team and allow them to feel cool and confident about your decisions and that you trust your own intuition to make those decisions. And I've seen both types, and I've had bosses of both types, and it does affect the team downstream. Corporate culture will affect the level of EI required for each job type and will affect the EI of managers. If you have a company which is promoting products that may be good for the earth or the environment, you may feel happy and comfortable at your position, and just the opposite. If your company maybe has a bad drug, or is polluting the environment, or is doing something to hurt mankind, you may not feel good in your position, or as confident or as happy as what you're doing in your position, and this will affect you emotionally, and thus trickle down, and people tend to leave those sorts of companies because it actually is impacting them emotionally and mentally. So there are two types of EI competencies when it comes to the workplace. There's social and there's personal. With social, there's really intuition and empathy, the ability to recognize emotions within others, and also the intuition to be able to recognize those feelings and how they may affect your judgment. This goes for you recognizing emotions in your reports, in yourself, and even those above you. The ability to anticipate and recognize and meet customer needs. Customers also have feelings towards your products and towards your company, and maybe towards how or what you can deliver and when you can deliver it. You have to be able to recognize that and work with that, and make sure that you are not giving off a bad vibe or a negative vibe about your product or your company. Understanding others in matrix organizations and direct reporting organizations. In matrix organizations, it's very important. There's a lot of dotted lines. People are unsure of their positions. There's insecurities there. You must recognize that as a manager and be able to work with it so you can make people feel comfortable, build that trustful relationship, and allow things to work even though there's not a direct reporting structure. When there is more of a direct reporting structure, people will know what it takes to get to the top, and they may want to build their career. And that comes to people development. So recognizing people's ambitions. They may want your job, they may want to go above you, they may want to climb the ladder. You should be able to recognize that and not be threatened by it. Have enough security in yourself to recognize your own ambitions and your own feelings towards what you can and cannot do in your position to leverage those people. And be able to recognize their passion for the job to be able to propel them in their careers. Political acumen and social skills play a big role in EI as well, especially when it comes to leadership and building bonds, especially in collaboration. There is a sense of trust and a certain sense of security about you delivering a product to another person on the other side of this collaboration, and vice versa on your side. There's a lot of sense of emotion, stepping on other people's toes, taking certain workloads, and there's a lot of sharing of responsibility there, which you must be aware of and be able to manage, and have it not directly affect your decision-making process, bias yourself, allows you to make professional and clear and focused decisions without a subjective bias. When it comes down to personal competencies, there's a lot of self-awareness, be able to recognize your own emotions and how those may affect you in making decisions in your group. Emotional awareness, accurate self-assessment, and self-confidence. So be able to be honest with yourself, be able to recognize what you're feeling and how you're feeling and when and what's causing it, and be able to handle that without it really affecting your psyche or confidence in yourself to deal with the situation. Self-regulation or self-control, be able to manage disruptive emotions or impulses that may force you to make rash decisions. If you're upset easily, if you're angry, if you're under stress or pressure, you may take rash decisions which you could regret later or become off as non-professional. Potentially get yourself in some sort of heated trouble because you've made decisions based off of your flare of emotions at the time rather than stepping back and thinking about the situation. Self-expectation and motivation. A lot of this deals with optimism and commitment to the program and also your initiative to push programs forward. Understanding how you feel about situations will determine how you motivate yourself to overcome those. And this requires some sense of esteem and also self-confidence. And for that to occur, you have to really be honest to yourself, be open, and be able to understand how your environment is influencing your decisions to make professional choices. So this is a nice slide which actually shows 3 different graphs pulled from online sources referenced in the back of this presentation. So the one in the upper left-hand corner shows the direct correlation between emotional intelligence, shown as EQ, a lot like IQ for intelligence, directly correlated to an increase in annual income. So those individuals with greater emotional intelligence tend to make more money. And those individuals which age over time tend to have higher EI. So it's directly correlated to age as well, shown in the upper right-hand corner. And this makes sense because over time you become more comfortable with yourself, You begin to understand yourself emotionally, what you can and cannot do. You understand others and other human beings and how you interact with them. You become more confident in what you can and cannot do, and you become okay with that. You realize you can't do everything. You realize you can't control every situation, and you basically become more confident in the decisions you're making. And the bottom graph basically shows direct correlation between emotional competencies and the need for leadership skills as compared to cognitive or technical skills. And basically those individuals which are required to lead an organization or a group, people rather than technical machines, like being in a laboratory or being in a machine shop, require greater EI. And that makes sense because they're really now leading people, their decisions, their focus, their emotions, basically their ambitions in a greater organization, and you have to have a little bit more intuition and empathy towards others. Thus, so the sense of EI has to be greater in those positions. And finally, EI in the customer and client. It's very important for the customer and client to feel that you are comfortable with the job you've performed, with what the team has delivered, with the product. You're optimistic and positive. It's important that the customer or client can feel your attitude towards what's been delivered, or you can feel how the client or customer feels about what has been delivered by your team, and be able to respond accordingly. If they're not happy, you should be able to recognize that, and if it's your fault, you should be able to take that fault and not be severely hurt by it. Things happen. Not every customer is happy with what they get. So there's a lot of emotions there because there's expectations, and there has to be a sense of trust. You also have to understand how emotions could impact the marketing plans on customers. So basically how things are marketed to the customer, how they feel about the product, how you feel about the product, and then be able to control yourself so you can provide a positive and objective opinion about your product and be able to sell it to the customer. And in general, EI really does come down to bottom lines. It comes down to ego, it comes down to self-esteem, it comes down to confidence in yourself, in your people, in your product, in your company. And any bias or sway or negative feeling you may have towards a product or your team or the company could impact your behavior, could influence the way you come off to a customer or a client outside the walls of the business, and you got to be able to control that within your head as to not to negatively impact the relationships, the business relationships you have with customers and clients, or even go so far as collaborations you may have with other companies.
In these upcoming slides, we'll be talking about emotional intelligence and its impact on the organization. The first impact, and maybe the most important impact in the eyes of companies, is its impact on the bottom line. The first example of this is at the cosmetics company L'Oreal. Sales agents who were selected using emotional intelligence competencies significantly outsold other sales agents who were hired using L'Oreal's old selection procedures. Annually, the sales agents who had higher emotional intelligence competencies sold $91,000 more on average than their counterparts, for an annual revenue increase of over $2.5 million. On top of that, there was a 63% lower turnover rate for sales agents who were hired using emotional intelligence competencies. This also helps a company's bottom line, as they're able to avoid having the cost of hiring and training a new employee for that position. Another example of improving the bottom line is at American Express Financial Advisors. Financial advisors who completed EI training experienced sales growth of 18.1%, about 2% higher than their counterparts who did not. The advisors who went through the training reported that this training was a life-changing event. Sales gains that their advisors made changed the way American Express Financial Advisors does business. EI training has now become part of the standard training for new advisors, along with being offered to various other members of the organization. These are just two of many studies and articles that show the ability of EI to improve the bottom line of a company. Having sales agents that were high in emotional intelligence was a common factor in these studies of improvements at companies. Another impact of EI on the organization is improved job performance. There are 2 studies conducted regarding emotional intelligence and its impact on debt collectors. 2 studies showed that an overall higher level of emotional intelligence in debt collectors contributed to more successful collections. Self-awareness, empathy, along with self-control and adaptability were seen to be key in avoiding what is known as an emotional hijack. An emotional hijack is the over-identification with the customer and failure to successfully collect the debt. Knowing this type of information is important, as other companies could then use EI training or selection criteria with their collectors to lower their potential bad debts and help improve their bottom line as well. Another impact of EI on the organization is its changes in hiring methods. A multinational beverage company had long used traditional methods of hiring division presidents. Using these methods, they experienced a 50% turnover rate within the first 2 years in the position. Changing the hiring method to one that uses areas of emotional intelligence competencies made a large change for this company. Using this new hiring method, the turnover of these division presidents dropped to 6%. Lowering the turnover level lowered expenses for this company. The dollar cost associated with executives leaving dropped from $4.5 million to about $500,000, which is a substantial improvement. These presidents hired with higher EI competencies also outperformed in their job performance targets by 15 to 20%. So not only did the company experience expense reduction by lowering their turnover, but also improvement in performance by changing their hiring methods to use emotional intelligence assessment as a core part of the hiring process. A meta-analysis was performed looking to see the correlation of emotional intelligence to job performance. Overall, there's a positive correlation between EI and job performance. There were 3 streams of EI assessment that were also broken down in the study. Streams 2 and 3, listed on the slide, incrementally predicted job performance over cognitive intelligence and the Big 5 personality traits: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. How can organizations improve their employees' EI? Since EI is able to be improved throughout a person's life, holding emotional competence training is an option for organizations. FedEx is an example of a company doing this. Through the company's Global Leadership Institute, FedEx implemented a new training program for managers that included a 1-week program with a 6-month coaching process follow-up. The follow-up allowed for goal setting and for continued improvement in areas that were needed. Those who underwent the program saw improvements, with 44% of those seeing large improvements in EI. Daniel Goleman, in his book Working with Emotional Intelligence, presented basic guidelines to teaching competencies based on emotional intelligence. There are 15 total elements presented by Goleman. These elements include assessing the job and the individual, gauging readiness, motivating the trainee, focusing on clear and manageable goals, preventing relapse, and evaluation of the trainee, among others. Goleman stressed that each of these elements is necessary for effective learning, but not sufficient by itself, and that the impact of each element increases to the degree it is part of a process that includes the others.
As the final part of this presentation, we would like to discuss specific examples of emotional intelligence being implemented at the places where we work and in our lives. Given the value that emotional intelligence brings to an organization and the positive effect it has proven to have on overall company success, any organization should endorse it, regardless of its size or industry. The company in particular that I would like to discuss today is the one that I work for, Accenture. Accenture is one of the top IT and management consulting firms in the world, with more than 280,000 employees and a nearly $30 billion annual revenue. Accenture has served Fortune 500 organizations across industries and has clients in the pharmaceuticals, airline, entertainment, and lodging industries, just to name a few. So I told you that we should implement emotional intelligence at Accenture. Let's take a look at why.
Accenture is a service-based company, and it primarily delivers direct services at client locations. With Accenture, there is a heavy interaction with client personnel that occurs at all levels of the client organization. The emphasis on one-on-one client interaction is huge, given that we work primarily in a client-driven environment. While competitors of Accenture also offer similar consulting services, what gives Accenture the competitive edge is truly its human capital, its employees. The expertise, knowledge, and leadership skills that Accenture resources bring to a client is unique, and it's one of its leading success factors. Given how critical human interaction is to Accenture's existence, it is important that the company uses emotional intelligence in both its hiring process as well as in the delivery of its services. Accenture management must demonstrate the ability to understand, express, and control emotions in hiring personnel, as must the employees of Accenture in delivering a client service. This is extremely important because how Accenture employees demonstrate emotion when working with a client will directly impact the client's perception of the organization and of its services. Let's discuss some benefits of becoming an emotionally intelligent organization. There will be improved decision-making and performance. The ability to control emotions and channel them towards being productive will lead to better decision-making amongst employees and management. Emotionally intelligent employees will also be able to better unlock their own potential, which will enhance individual performance, and when everyone is able to do that collectively, the organizational performance will also improve. There will be mitigated risks because employees now will be making more practical decisions that have been weighed against alternate solutions as opposed to making hasty or rushed decisions that are more impulsive. Stronger relationships would also be a result of implementing emotional intelligence. More control over negative emotions will help facilitate more open communication, create trust, understanding, and resilience, and long-lasting relationships, both within the organization and externally with clients as well. More positive interactions internally will translate, like I said, into more strong relationships with clients externally. There will also be faster conflict resolution. So if Accenture management is emotionally intelligent, conflict can be avoided more effectively. Historically, given the nature of tough and complex decisions that are made at the workplace, taking decisions on a purely emotional basis could serve as a hindrance to success. So when employees become more emotionally intelligent, there is more conflict resolution and faster conflict resolution. Now, the combined result of all of these benefits that I've just discussed is, of course, a fatter, more positive bottom line figure. What I'm referring to is increased profits. As with all methodologies, emotional intelligence also has a few drawbacks. Implementing emotional intelligence can be a slow process. Patience and persistence would be key to ensuring that it is successfully implemented at all levels of an organization. Not only would tools need to be devised for incorporating emotional intelligence in the hiring process, training would need to be provided also to employees on how to become more emotionally intelligent in going about their jobs. This will take time and would need repeated reinforcement. Also, the leadership of an organization absolutely has to lead by example. An organization is only as good as its leadership is, so if management of a company does not back up its talk with actions that serve as examples to others, the attempts to implement EI will be unsuccessful. Lastly, as with any change, there will be undeniable and inevitable financial costs that the organization must incur to set up emotional intelligence. As we can see above, though, the drawbacks are mainly related to going through the initial pains of implementing the methodology. Given the tangible benefits and the broad success that emotional intelligence brings, the benefits certainly outweigh the drawbacks, making it a method to endorse.
And now for a look at using emotional intelligence at a decidedly different end of the spectrum, our family business, Robert James Cleaning. As an aside, I never thought I would be doing a presentation comparing how to implement a policy at Accenture, a large global consulting firm, with our company. Robert James Cleaning is a small family retail maintenance business that provides supplementary maintenance services to exactly one Fortune 500 client in southeastern Pennsylvania and the entirety of New Jersey. Using the concepts of emotional intelligence in a small family business can be even more critical than in a large business. After all, they are your family and you can't very easily quit over differences in opinion the way you would if you worked in a more normal corporate context. This is especially true when the whole family works for a business and the business runs on a 24/7 on-call basis. They are a major part of both your personal and professional life. One thing you learn working in a family business is that marriage, or even friendships, are not unlike business relationships. You have to be able to constructively discuss issues faced in your marriage and family relationships in a similar manner to a work environment. Otherwise, a failure to discuss issues could come across as nagging, leading to both reduced profitability and an inability to get support from those you need it from the most. Emotional intelligence is understanding how emotions affect oneself and other people in various situations. Having emotional intelligence would make you understand what you shouldn't say to someone because it might hurt their feelings. For example, if a woman says, "Do you like my new dress?" but you think it's the most hideous thing you've ever seen, your emotional intelligence would keep you from saying to her, "No, I hate it, it's the most hideous dress I've ever seen." Instead, you would look for something non-committal to say, like, "It's a very nice color." Another example may be if you have a little kid who won't stop screaming. A person with low EI might scream back at the kids. A person with high EI would look at the child and speak in a normal tone of voice and distract him. Say, "When you stop screaming, we can play with Barbies." If we were to summarize the principles and takeaways of this presentation in one sentence, it would be this: recognize and consider both the emotions of yourself and the emotions of others, and take responsibility for your own actions. Emotional intelligence is an important skill to learn. It can get others to work with you or be attracted to you as a partner, leader, or coworker. Emotional intelligence is like any other skill in life. It takes time to practice and refine and develop. It has to be considered an essential part of your thought process. How are you going to feel about the world and how others react to those feelings is essential to success in all facets, not just monetary, in life. Thank you very much.